Before we get into today's case, I need to give you a warning. This one is extremely dark. If graphic details involving child abuse are not something that you can listen to today, please protect your peace and click away right now. There will be other episodes, but this one is going to be hard. For those of you still here, I'd like for you to do something for me. I want you to think back to being 5 years old. What the world looked like for you. Maybe it was cartoons, favorite toys, running outside, asking a million questions, and dreaming impossible dreams. Now, I want you to think about that entire world shrinking down to the size of a closet, 5 by 3 feet, for 20 hours a day. No food, no water, no light, just sounds. Sounds of your siblings playing with toys and eating pizza and living a life that you're just flat out being denied. Sounds of your mother telling you no when you ask for water from that closet. It sounds barbaric, unimaginable even. But for 5-year-old Kinsleigh Welty, this was her reality. And this reality was created by the adults in her life that were supposed to be protecting her. And they failed. And that failure cost Kinsleigh her life. Today, we are diving into a heartbreaking case in Marion County, Indiana. One that will leave you angry, devastated, and honestly just asking, how can something like this even happen? It is a case that recently hit a major unexpected roadblock in court, and it is also the tragedy behind a brand new Indiana law that was just put into effect a couple days ago. This story is heavy, I'm not going to lie, and it's raw and just absolutely devastating. But Kinsleigh no longer has her voice. So today, we're going to say her name, we're going to tell her story, and make sure that she's finally heard. This is N2THE92. I'm your host, Shannon. Let's dive in.
Every crime leaves a digital trail. Every dark secret has a number. Are you ready to decode the truth? This is N2THE92.
On April 9th, 2024, emergency dispatch in Indianapolis, Indiana received a call from a mobile home park on the city's far east side. The caller reported that a 5-year-old girl was unresponsive.
Southwest 61, possible DOA 6512 Denver Drive, 4535, south 6800 west. Where? Keeper. At 1712, 5-year-old juvenile.
6519 Sanders Drive, working pediatrics cardiac arrests. 6519 Sanders Drive, working pediatrics cardiac arrests.
When first responders arrived at 6519 Denver Drive, what they found was not just a medical emergency. It was something far more horrifying. Police were met by what appeared to be a frantic, distraught mother, Toni McClure. Toni told officers that she had picked her daughter up, Kinsleigh Welty, who was 5 years old, after what she claimed was a month-and-a-half-long visit with Kinsleigh's father. According to Toni, she had not noticed anything physically wrong with Kinsleigh when she picked her up because of the clothes that Kinsleigh was wearing. But on the way home, Toni said Kinsleigh complained of headaches, and then once they walked through the front door, Kinsleigh made a comment about her legs hurting and then just collapsed. Toni claimed that when Kinsleigh fell out, she immediately started CPR, and then she called her boyfriend, Ryan Smith, to come pick up the other children in the home. Right away, red flag for me. If you've ever performed CPR, you know that it's not something that you multitask through. You're using your whole body to keep somebody alive. You're not realistically doing effective CPR and making phone calls at the same time. So I call bullshit on that one, but that's what she says. This is just the first of many versions of this story that Toni is going to tell. So anywho, emergency responders rushed Kinsleigh to Riley Children's Hospital, but tragically, 5-year-old Kinsleigh Welty died shortly after arriving. Medical staff reported that she was covered in feces and lice, that it was crawling on her little face, and that she was severely emaciated. At 5 years old, most children weigh around 40 pounds, but Kinsleigh weighed just 21 on the day that she died. And according to records from Riley Children's Hospital, Kinsleigh weighed more when she was 2 years old than she did on the day that she died. And once detectives saw the state that Kinsleigh was in, they just began uncovering a truly devastating reality. Before we get into the horrific facts of this case, I do want to take a pause for a second and talk about who Kinsleigh was. Kinsleigh was born on December 3rd, 2018, and from the very beginning, life was not easy for her. Both of her parents, Toni McClure and Bradley Welty, struggled with substance abuse, and the condition of the home was so poor that Department of Children's Services removed Kinsleigh and her siblings when she was only a few weeks old. Toni and Bradley were later charged and convicted with felony neglect. After that removal, Kinsleigh and her brother, who was a toddler at the time, were placed with their paternal grandparents. While living with her grandparents, Brian and Tricia Welty, Kinsleigh was surrounded by love, stability, attention. At first, she needed some time to adjust. While she was at Riley Hospital, she was diagnosed with failure to thrive. But with proper care, she truly began to heal. She became happy, healthy, and deeply loved by her grandparents. Her grandparents were even making plans to adopt her, but in mid-2021, those plans changed when Kinsleigh was placed back in Toni's care. According to the people who knew her best, Kinsleigh was just an absolute joy to be around. She loved Taylor Swift's "You Need to Calm Down" so much that her family called it her anthem, and honestly, same. And she would sing the whole song in the car with her grandparents. I can just completely picture this little tiny spunky Swiftie belting it out from the back seat. Kinsleigh also had a silly, playful side. She loved stealing her dad's hats and sneaking around the house in them, just waiting for him to notice. She was obsessed with Paw Patrol and Bubble Guppies. Last week, I got to speak with Brian Welty, which is Kinsleigh's grandfather, and he described to me the condition that Kinsleigh was in when she arrived at his home and what it was like having his grandchildren there.
We got her when she was 6 weeks old. The time that she was here, she made a lot of progress as far as trusting me and my wife and our family that we have here that was living in the house with us. And to see that transformation in her is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
That was truly amazing. Could only imagine where it started from, and she's left our care again.
I can
the
imagine.
changes she had made, that was, really special.
While she was with her grandparents, Kinsleigh began to grow into just a happy little girl. But that changed when she was placed back into the environment that slowly broke her down in every way possible. As I mentioned earlier, Kinsleigh was placed back into Toni's care in mid-2021. By August 4th of that same year, someone had already requested a welfare check on the children in Toni's home. That report led to Kinsleigh and one of her siblings being taken to the hospital for concerns of abuse and neglect. Kinsleigh was only 2 years old at this time, and both children were covered in marks, welts, bruises, and they both appeared to be extremely underfed. After that, Kinsleigh was placed back with her paternal grandparents, Brian and Tricia Welty. When I was talking to Brian about this, he had a difficult time explaining things. You could just tell that it was extremely hard seeing his grandchildren in this state. He told me that when Kinsleigh arrived, she would barely talk, and physically she was just covered head to toe in bruises. But after just a couple weeks of stability, safety, and care, once again, Kinsleigh began to improve. And Brian told me that this is when he bonded with Kinsleigh the most, because at this point she was a little bit older and she had her own little personality and interest and things like that.
And that second time, when the kids came to us, it was like, it was, I don't know, it was so bad.
Just like the bruises and things like that?
Yeah. So the second time is when I really got to, she was 2 years old and I could interact with her a lot more. And she was, for the first few weeks, it was very hard to get her to talk to anybody, let alone interact with anybody. I want to say she ended up like a normal girl by the time she left here, but she wasn't. We didn't have a lot of time with them. The limited time we did have with them is, was truly a blessing.
On August 27, 2021, DCS substantiated the allegations of abuse and neglect against Toni. But then, in a shocking turn of events, Kinsleigh was placed back in her mother's care by December of that year, so literally just a few months later. And the reason for that decision, honestly, made me see red. Kinsleigh was taken out of the safe, loving home she knew with her grandparents and returned to her abuser because of an error in court. You did not hear that wrong. The attorney for DCS, the Department of Child Services, brought in a nurse practitioner to testify on behalf of the doctor as to the condition of the children when they were brought in back in August. And that's just not accepted in court. There has to be the doctor testifying, not somebody testifying on behalf of the doctor. And also, the evidence in the case was not properly labeled. They didn't have names with pictures and anything like that. And also, what Kinsleigh's name was on, they misspelled. So you could just tell that zero effort went into anything for these children in this situation. The judge even gave the attorney an additional 24 hours to get their life together, basically. And they reconvened the next day, and they didn't do anything. They didn't fix anything, made no effort for these kids. And this led to the case being dismissed and the children being placed back into Toni's care. Here is Brian Welty, Kinsleigh's grandfather, explaining how all of this unfolded from the perspective of the people who actually gave a shit about Kinsleigh.
During the first case, I felt that was attempted murder. Yes, Toni's been convicted of child neglect. And then she had another case by DCS brought against her that ultimately had to be dropped. So it's not a one-time thing.
I heard that the other DCS case that you were talking about that got dropped was because DCS failed to present a medical witness. But then I heard that there were other things as well that was wrong with that case. Is that true? Other things as well. Do you know what the other things were?
Yeah, they brought a nurse practitioner in to testify for a doctor. Can't do that. They brought in all their evidence, all their photos, none of it was labeled, none of it had her name on it. Nothing tied any of them kids to any of the evidence because nothing was labeled correctly. And there was a couple other minor things that they're escaping my mind right now, but those are definitely the two biggest things.
I think I also read that they didn't even spell her name right or something just ridiculous.
On one of the reports, I think you're right. Yeah.
That's insane to me. Didn't the judge even give them an extra day?
Yes.
To get that information together? That's insane.
Yeah, she told him, that I can't remember if it was 28, 48 hours, but she just said, we're going to recess until whatever, you better have your stuff together. It got to where the judge had no choice but to return them to Toni's care. because the DCS attorney failed to provide any evidence that could be held against her, and therefore the kids had to be placed back with her.
And sadly, this would not be the last time that DCS failed Kinsleigh. Beginning in November of 2023, several more reports would be made. But before we get into those, unfortunately, we have to talk about Toni McClure. Because to understand what happened to Kinsleigh, we have to look at the person responsible for locking Kinsleigh away, barricading the door, and treating her baby girl like she was just disposable. She's quite possibly the biggest piece of shit I've ever researched, by the way. And that's saying something. If you only followed media coverage back in April of 2024, this may have just sounded like a tragic, horrific nightmare. But once you start peeling back the layers of the headlines and you dig into the court records and you follow the paper trail left by the state of Indiana, it becomes painfully clear that this was not sudden at all. The warning signs had been there for years. They were loud, they were flashing red, and they were witnessed by multiple people. And there was even documentation of this, yet somehow nobody did anything to help her. And the people that were trying to help her were pushed out of her life, quite literally not even able to see her anymore because of Toni McClure. Now, there's not a lot out there when it comes to Toni's upbringing, but court records do indicate that her childhood is a textbook representation of just a generational cycle of abuse. So much so that her mother, Tammy Halsey, is her co-defendant in the murder of Kinsleigh. Yeah. Needless to say, the apple does not fall far from the tree at all. And Toni's defense team has relied heavily on this angle that her poor upbringing has resulted in a generational instability and severe family enabling and just all around parental failure. I disagree. I disagree for a lot of reasons. I know there are a lot of people out there that have had hard childhoods and they don't grow up to do what this disgusting human did. So I don't think that not having the easiest life growing up is a great excuse for murdering your little baby and torturing her in the way that you did. It just, to me, that sucks to suck. I'm sorry your childhood sucked, but that's not an excuse. During her interview with detectives, Toni's dislike for Kinsleigh was painfully obvious. And at first she did try to lie about what happened to Kinsleigh, but once detectives told her that they found the closet, she quickly admitted what she did, at least her version of what she did. Toni said Kinsleigh had not been visiting her father. No shit. And that their father hadn't seen the children in years. She admitted that she knew leaving Kinsleigh in the closet all day was wrong and understood Kinsleigh could die without food or water, but said she just simply didn't want to deal with Kinsleigh. Even when she heard Kinsleigh screaming from inside the closet because she was hungry, she just didn't want to deal with her. She just didn't feel like it. Toni also stated that her and Kinsleigh never really developed a bond, and she made claims that Kinsleigh was, quote, bad, unquote, which is why she was treated differently than the other children in the home. She also said that Kinsleigh did not like her and that Kinsleigh hated her. And I don't blame Kinsleigh for that one bit, because I think I would hate you too if you literally tortured me to death. I think that deserves a little bit of hate from the person you're torturing, at least. Toni also said in her interview that Kinsleigh said something to her right before she collapsed and ultimately died. She said that Kinsleigh told her that she wanted to die. And that's just the most awful thing I've ever heard. I think a 5-year-old isn't capable of understanding the finality of death. That's not something that a 5-year-old brain is or should know. And the fact that this baby was tortured the way that she was to such an extent that she felt that way it's fucking awful. It's sickening. It's disgusting. And Toni also admitted that she rarely ever fed Kinsleigh, and she only let her out of the closet when she had to go somewhere. Eventually, Toni said, Kinsleigh would automatically return to the closet on her own as soon as they got home, without Toni even having to tell her. Toni admitted to the detectives that when it came to taking care of Kinsleigh, she, quote, did the bare fucking minimum, unquote. She also said that DCS had been at her house earlier that day. So the day Kinsleigh died, earlier that day, DCS was there, and the reason for that visit was a month prior to Kinsleigh dying, Toni had a baby, and that baby's umbilical cord tested positive for THC. So DCS got involved. Toni said the DCS worker did ask where Kinsleigh was, and at that time, she told the DCS worker that Kinsleigh was at her grandparents' house. The DCS worker did a walkthrough of Toni's house, and Toni says that when the caseworker was doing that walkthrough, Kinsleigh was actually in a back bedroom covered up with a blanket. And the DCS worker never looked in that room. So they pronounced Kinsleigh dead at the hospital. Every bit of me wonders, like, what if that caseworker would have just looked in that room and seen her and called 911? As a Department of Child Services caseworker, I don't know why you would do a walkthrough of a house and not look at every single bedroom. That makes no sense to me. There's honestly so much I can unpack with everything I just told you about. Toni had 5 children, 4 boys and Kinsleigh. All the other children that lived in that home, which was 3 of the boys at the time, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-month-old, were all treated differently than Kinsleigh. I'm pretty sure, based on the state of the home and the piece of shit that Toni is, that those boys didn't have it easy either. But none of the other children were locked in that closet and starved, were beaten the way that she was. And I have my theories as to why. And I'll explain that in a bit. Now, I know I just went on a whole tangent about how much I hate and despise Toni, but I honestly can't decide if I hate Toni or her mother, Tammy Halsey, more. To me, they're the same person. They're equally as responsible, in my opinion, for Kinsleigh being tortured and murdered. And Tammy Halsey is the equivalent of the human version of dumpster juice, in my opinion. She just doesn't deserve air to breathe. Tammy and her piece of shit daughter, Toni, would communicate often via Facebook Messenger about ways to keep food and water away from Kinsleigh. They would also talk about a plethora of other disturbing things. And in one message where Toni is asking Tammy to watch Kinsleigh, Tammy tells her she doesn't want to because she's got to work the next day. And Toni's response is, do your duct tape thing. Sleep. I won't ask again. It's honestly disgusting. And what she's talking about in that message is when Tammy would watch Kinsleigh, she would duct tape up her little body at bedtime so that Kinsleigh couldn't get up and sneak food and water in the middle of the night. There's several other messages that were released between Toni and Tammy, and they're all just as equally disturbing. In one exchange, Toni sent Tammy a picture of Kinsleigh crouched down beside a couch, and she wrote, "She escaped the closet." Tammy replied, "Wrap her fucking ass up." Tammy told investigators that she had seen Kinsleigh on April 8th, which was the day before Kinsleigh died, at a family gathering for the eclipse. Tammy said that when the family arrived, Toni immediately put Kinsleigh in the corner, and she stood there during the whole event. So for hours, the day before she died, she was forced to stand and face the wall. So this entire family got together to watch this eclipse and could see Kinsleigh visibly unwell and forced to stand in this corner, and nobody stepped in. No one questioned it. No one even tried to do anything to protect her. There's something seriously fucking wrong with this family. Investigators also interviewed Ryan Smith, which was Toni's boyfriend at that time and also the father of the newborn baby that they had. Ryan told detectives that he knew what was happening to Kinsleigh and he knew it was wrong. He also knew that she could die from it. He actually told his mother that he was worried that Kinsleigh was going to die and that he was scared because he didn't want to lose Toni or the other children. Ryan also stated that Kinsleigh's not allowed around his family anymore because, get this, she had made a claim against Ryan's uncle that he had touched her inappropriately. Ryan said he believes that claim is not true and that keeping Kinsleigh in the closet was just safer for everybody. In all reality, your uncle's probably disgusting and you're making excuses for it because you are too.
And for Ryan, he has to be held accountable too. He's seen that girl every single day. They made jokes about her that she would cry and whine because she was so hungry. They made a joke, a running joke in their household about that she was a whiner and a crier. They would laugh at her and point and I'm sorry.
When Kinsleigh was found by first responders, a truly unbelievable trail of neglect and just disregard for Kinsleigh's safety was uncovered, but not just at the hands of Toni, Tammy, and Ryan. DCS was just as responsible. The Department of Child Services was just as responsible for the murder of Kinsleigh. And her grandfather, Brian Welty, is currently suing the Department of Child Services for that reason. And I was able to get the complaint records from this civil case that's happening right now. So I'm going to go down this timeline with you. And to be honest, I thought I'd seen everything in my career. And this is just next level. The timeline of DCS reports and closures I'm about to go through with you is the definition of systemic failure and injustice, and honestly, pure laziness on behalf of the caseworkers that touched Kinsleigh's file. It's infuriating. Now, I already gave you the DCS report breakdown from 2018 to 2021 when Kinsleigh was removed from Toni's custody and placed with her grandparents. The timeline we're going to go through now is going to pick up on November 8th, 2023. And that's when DCS received a report alleging that Toni was not feeding Kinsleigh, that she had left marks on Kinsleigh after hitting her with a belt, and that Kinsleigh was forced to stand facing a wall for hours. So what Tammy said happened at the eclipse party, which I definitely believe, of Kinsleigh having to stand in the corner for hours while the whole family was together and celebrating this eclipse and watching this eclipse together. This is obviously not something new. This is, it appears based on this report, like this has been a regular thing happening to Kinsleigh. But instead of the caseworker assigned to this report investigating or looking into these allegations despite never laying eyes on Kinsleigh, this caseworker closed the case as unsubstantiated just 2 days later on November 8th, 2023. Never even looked at Kinsleigh, never seen her. The caseworker documented that there's no family history of neglect or abuse. So even though Toni had been charged and convicted with felony neglect for Kinsleigh. And Kinsleigh had spent a chunk of her life not even allowed to live with Toni per the Department of Child Services. No report, no history can be located. So we're just going to close the case and do nothing. And then on December 5th, 2023, another report was submitted to DCS alleging that Kinsleigh appeared to be severely underweight and malnourished. Again, no contact was made with Kinsleigh by a caseworker. The case was submitted for closure by the caseworker on December 19th, 2023, and then signed off on and officially closed by the caseworker's supervisor. So, and with Department of Child Services, if the caseworker assigned to the case recommends that the case be closed, it has to be submitted to their supervisor, and then their supervisor has to go through all the findings of the case and then sign off on that closure. So every single time these cases are being closed regarding Kinsleigh, it's two people that have to sign off on that. And two people each time, two random, totally different people each time. They're just not doing shit. So on December 12th, 2023, so while the previous report was still active, remember it closed on December 19th, another report was made to DCS stating that Kinsleigh was severely underweight and malnourished. It also reported at the time that there was no heat or hot water in the home. This is December in Indiana, and it's usually freezing. The case was submitted for closure by the caseworker on December 21st, 2023, and then signed off on and officially closed by the caseworker supervisor. On December 14th, 2023, another report was submitted to DCS, making this 3 active reports open at the same time. It was reported that Kinsleigh was severely underweight and malnourished. It was also reported that Kinsleigh's hair appeared to be falling out, and locks were being placed on the refrigerator and the cabinets to prevent Kinsleigh from having access to food. On December 28th, 2023, a follow-up report was submitted to DCS about this case because nothing had been done at that point, and the case was still submitted for closure by the caseworker on January 8th, 2024, so after they probably had a really good holiday break with their families, and meanwhile, Kinsleigh's starving to death and being tortured in a closet. And that case was officially signed off on and closed by the supervisor. On January 11th, 2024, another report was filed to DCS alleging that Kinsleigh was extremely malnourished, that she was being treated differently than the other children in the home, and that she was being mistreated by not only her mother, but her maternal grandmother and her mother's boyfriend. This case was submitted for closure by the caseworker on January 24th, 2024, and then signed off on and officially closed by the caseworker supervisor. The very next day, on January 25th, 2024, another case was submitted to DCS, but this one was about Kinsleigh's brother because he had missed too many days of school. DCS did come to the home and see all the children besides Kinsleigh and spoke with Toni. They decided everything was awesome in the home, and yet again, this case was closed by, get this, the very next day, January 26, 2024. On March 3rd, 2024, DCS again received a report, but this one was the one I was telling you about earlier, where the newborn had THC in its system when it was born. DCS came out, saw all the children aside from Kinsleigh. This case wouldn't be as easy to close, obviously. And the caseworker is the same caseworker that came to the home on the day that Kinsleigh died, which I discussed earlier. There were several cases filed, and not one time did anybody lay eyes on that baby. And the way that she looked, you could visibly see her. Those reports, those people calling in reports, that's not the same person every time. There's neighbors, parents in the school pickup line that see her in the car when she's picking up her kids. when Toni's picking up her kids from school, like, and Kinsleigh's just sitting there wasting away, and random people at the grocery store, they're all different people, and everything in these reports is exactly what was happening to her and is what led to her death. And not one caseworker made it a goal to see this baby. And it's just insane to me. When it came time to file charges for what happened to Kinsleigh, the state placed responsibility on 3 people inside the home. Kinsleigh's mother, obviously, Toni McClure, Toni's boyfriend, Ryan Smith, and Kinsleigh's grandmother, Tammy Halsey. From a law enforcement perspective, the physical evidence in this case is extremely overwhelming. The neglect is super visible. It was measurable. It was just impossible to ignore. And in late 2025, both Ryan Smith and Tammy Halsey pleaded guilty to neglect resulting in death. As a part of their plea agreements, they also agreed to testify against Toni McClure. For that reason, their plea deals will not be finalized until Toni's murder trial is complete. That trial finally began in June of 2026, so just last month, with Toni McClure facing charges of murder and criminal confinement. For Kinsleigh's family and for everyone who had followed this case, it felt like they might finally be getting their moment of justice for Kinsleigh. But on June 23rd, 2026, everything halted. A juror was dismissed, and the defense argued that the remaining jurors had failed to follow the instructions of the court, and the judge decided that there was no other option but to declare a mistrial. The state is now forced to start all over in Toni McClure's murder trial, and once again, justice for Kinsleigh is being delayed. Brian Welty told me that he was shocked when it happened. He said everyone had just returned from lunch and everything seemed normal until suddenly it just wasn't. But he also told me that as devastating as the mistrial is, he is grateful that it happened only 2 days into the trial rather than years later on an appeal. Because if that juror's negligence had come to light after the conviction, it could have put the entire case at risk and potentially allowed Toni to walk free. He also explained what Kinsleigh's loved ones will have to sit through for a second time next month at the new trial.
I'm so involved, so I'm sure I'm biased,
Absolutely.
But to me, that is incredibly, I don't know how to put it, because the judge said it like so many times to the jury every day about talking to people, and for him to be so careless and put that on jeopardy like that, what if that wouldn't have gotten caught until 5 years down the road and it got brought up on appeal, and for some reason that's the reason why she gets off in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
How could you be so careless to ever risk that?
Do you know how they did it? Because I've seen conflicting stories about how the contact was made between the juror and the witness.
The only, I of course don't have 100%. What I've been told is that the juror came up and asked a witness a couple questions, or a question, I'm not really sure. He got an answer, and then he went back and told 2 other jurors about it. And a third juror, another juror seen that going on and reported it to the officer. Well, thank God for that person, honestly. Yeah, no doubt. If she wouldn't have stepped up, who knows what could have happened, Absolutely. That's insane for somebody to even risk something like that. And that's where, as soon as the shock wears off that, oh my God, we got to reset this roller coaster again, as soon as that stops, it's like you start thinking about that, at least it got brought up now. We don't have to worry about something stupid like that, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. We're being even like 7 days in instead of 2, even though I know every bit of it's got to be just awful.
Yeah. We went through the 911 call. We went through body cam footage. We went through a lot of stuff that, like I was saying, the details that help paint the exact picture. That people think they have a picture of what happened in that closet, but they don't. It's...
As an investigator, when you look into a homicide, the questions as to what led to that, they're pretty cut and dry. But with Kinsleigh's case, the question that just keeps coming back, it's damning. How did so many people witness the torture and the hell that this baby was living and do nothing? Ryan Smith's best friend, coworker, has even stayed the night at the house with them. And he said in an interview with police that he knew Kinsleigh was in the closet. He didn't know why. He didn't ask. If I ever went to anybody's home and there was a child being kept in a closet, I'm not going to say what I would do, but I would definitely make sure that baby gets out of that closet. And this guy's just like, not my business. It's infuriating. And the truth is, though, there are people that did try for Kinsleigh. Every single person that called DCS and filed a report, they were trying to help her. And Brian told me that despite what some headlines may suggest, Kinsleigh was deeply loved and wanted by him and his wife. And he said watching her leave the only real home that she's ever known, it was devastating for them, especially after seeing how much progress she had made. To them, it felt like Kinsleigh was being sent right back into the environment that she had spent so much time healing from. And it broke their hearts. When I first heard about this case, it sounded horrific, but I don't think I truly was able to grasp the depth of it until I saw 2 pictures. I am going to show you guys these pictures, and they're not autopsy pictures or anything like that, but they are extremely, extremely disturbing. So I do want to give you a clear warning before I put these pictures on the screen. One picture is fine. It's just a picture of Kinsleigh when she's 2 years old. The second picture I put up, it is extremely disturbing. If you do not want to see this, I will tell you exactly when you need to fast forward, and you should do that if you don't think this is something you can look at. If you're able to, I do think that this is something people need to see. Not because it's easy to look at, not by any stretch, but it makes the failure that this baby faced, and it makes it hard to ignore. When I first saw these pictures, the first thing I did was cry. I'm going to be real with you. But after I've learned everything about this case that I just walked all of you through, that photo, it kind of pushed me to want to do something, anything, to just help these children in these situations. And maybe I'm hopeful that it might do the same for some of you, and maybe we can make a difference. So like I said, the first photo I'm going to show you is Kinsleigh at 2 years old, and she's happy, healthy, and loved. This is your warning. If you don't want to see the next photo, go ahead and fast forward. The next photo shows Kinsleigh's legs at the hospital. I want you to sit with that image for a moment and ask yourself how anyone can look at a child in that condition and not feel compelled to act. It made Kinsleigh's grandfather want to do something. And it should make all of us ask what needs to change so this never happens to another child. Over Kinsleigh's short life, multiple reports were made to the Indiana Department of Child Services by people who were terrified for her safety. And according to the lawsuit filed after her death, 10 different family case managers touched this family's file. 10. Neighbors reported abuse. Family members begged for someone to intervene. But again and again, DCS caseworkers closed the reports and marked the allegations as unsubstantiated. And here's the part that should make everybody angry. As I've stated, they were closed without anybody laying eyes on this child. And had they laid eyes on her, that picture I just showed you, that's what they would have seen. They took Toni's word for it, documented the file, closed the case, and left that 5-year-old little girl trapped in that closet. Since then, Kinsleigh's grandfather has filed the civil lawsuit against the state of Indiana, alleging a complete systemic failure by the very agency that was supposed to protect her, the agency that is put into place to protect our children. But from that horrific failure, something important has happened. On July 1st, 2026, so just a couple weeks ago, a new law officially took effect across Indiana, and it's called Kinsleigh's Law. Passed as House Enrollment Act 1036 and signed by Governor Mike Braun, Kinsleigh's Law changed the way child abuse and neglect investigations are handled in Indiana. Moving forward, DCS cannot close a case based on only a phone call, a parent's explanation, or paperwork. Before a file can be closed, a caseworker must see the child in person within 30 days. Brian Welty explains why he pushed so hard for this law to pass and what it meant to him when it finally did.
Oh, it's very relieving in a sense, you know. It's hard to have those mixed emotions of knowing why that bill came to pass. And I'm not just talking about Kinsleigh, but the children that had to suffer for this all to come to fruition. And to know the lives that it will save and I absolutely believe that. There's not another feeling like it. It was so exciting to be in the House of Representatives, the U.S. senators, the governor's office, you know, doing something to take this tragedy and make people aware of what's going on in their neighborhood and what DCS is doing, the changes that need and have to be made. And these two House bills are a very, very good start. And it was really great to be a part of.
Kinsleigh's Law was passed because a child died after every safety net that is put into place to protect her failed. It exists because Kinsleigh's own mother admitted to detectives that she never bonded with her daughter and that she did the bare fucking minimum for her. It exists because Toni listened to her 5-year-old baby girl beg for food, water, and a bathroom and still did nothing. Kinsleigh was removed from her abuser twice. And twice she was sent back. That is not just a tragedy. That is failure. And it should force every one of us to ask loudly and urgently, how many more Kinsleighs are out there right now being tortured and mistreated, are starving right this very minute? I'm going to be following Toni McClure's upcoming murder trial very closely. I'm also going to be following the civil case with Kinsleigh's grandfather. And as these cases continue to move through the courts, I'll bring you guys updates. So if you want to stay informed on what happens next in Kinsleigh's case, make sure you subscribe to this podcast and follow N2THE92 on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. This case was next level horrifying, and Kinsleigh's Law is just the first step, in my opinion. There are still so many questions about accountability, reporting, follow through, and what ordinary people can do when they believe a child's in danger. I want to hear from you guys. I want you to leave me a comment and tell me what you think as citizens. What can we do to prevent something like this from happening again? I'd like to thank you all for staying with me through such a difficult episode. I know this one was super heavy. My thoughts and my prayers are definitely with Kinsleigh's loved ones. And I hope that by continuing to talk about Kinsleigh, say her name, and demand better, her story can help protect another child before it's too late. I'd also like to thank Brian Welty for taking the time to talk to me and for the advocating that he has done for our Hoosier babies in the wake of the tragedy that him and his family have had to live through. Until next time, I'm Shannon. This is N2THE92. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in 2 Tuesdays with an all-new episode. Bye.